So this is the 2024 Mazda CX-50, and it is Mazda's more rugged off-road themed SUV that comes in the form of a compact or crossover SUV. Now, let's not get too carried away. This isn't necessarily an all-trail conquering monster, but it is looking to steal a bit of that market share. The CX-50 has a starting price of $30,300, and regardless of what trim you choose to go with, it does include all-wheel drive, additional ground clearance, and even off-road modes, while all getting Mazda's, of course, infamous dynamic driving and styling capabilities. But if you opt for the higher trim models like the turbo engine, that also makes the CX-50 one of the most powerful models available in this segment. Moving on to the exterior of the Mazda CX-50. This particular vehicle happens to be the Turbo Premium Plus, which is the top of the line model that starts at $43,300, so a considerable increase over the CX-50 base price of $30,300. But what I want to show you in the back here is obviously the CX-50 nameplate, and we can see we have the all-wheel drive badge as well here. And the reason I want to show you that is, of course, that's kind of a play on the Mazda CX-5, which is Mazda's sort of staple vehicle that you'll see all over the place, but this is a bit more capable, a bit more focused than that model. If you were cross-shopping the two and you're wondering what the big changes were, aside from maybe aesthetics, let's say, because they have a lot of the same engine options and total seating arrangements and things like that, the CX-50 has more ground clearance. The CX-5 is rated for 7.6 inches, but the base model of the CX-50 is rated for 8.3 inches. Now, if you go for one of the higher trim models, there's a few different options that have it, especially this top of the line trim model, you'll actually get the larger 20-inch wheels here. So of course, these are a premium wheel choice that are available. So you have to spend a little bit more money, but that does also get more ground clearance. So now you're up to 8.6 inches of total ground clearance, which means the CX-50 has a total inch of more ground clearance than the CX-5. That's not too shabby. And if you're even looking at, let's say, the RAV4 and some of the other vehicles that are available, this can also feature more ground clearance than that, which makes it just a little bit more capable in terms of total off-road capability. This particular example also happens to be machine gray metallic, in case you were wondering. Now let's look at the front of the vehicle to start. It looks fairly aggressive. We can see the nice angular cuts. Mazda's always had great styling, but there's a variety of functionality. These vents are half covered, so they're not really functional up here. And then we do have this nice little silver piece, which kind of gives the appearance of a skid plate, but it's not really. And then even this little part that extends out a bit has the sort of appearance of a brush card, but again, not really meant to be as well. Now, if we take a look at these headlights, these are, of course, very functional. These are LED headlights, and they feature Mazda's adaptive lighting, meaning this section of the headlight right here will actually lead your steering wheel while you're driving at night and guide the turn in front of you, which is a really cool feature, so they'll move around inside that headlight lens. As we go ahead and take a few steps back to see the side of the vehicle, you'll notice that we have this black plastic trim that runs along the edge of the vehicle, around the fenders and such. And that's, of course, to be a bit more protective, although it is kind of a fad at the moment in the industry, and you'll see it on a lot of vehicles, especially Subarus. You go ahead and get up close with it, you'll notice it's got this cool sort of off-road theme to it and does have these sort of geometric shapes. And the reason it's there is to be a bit more protective off-road. So for example, if you're off-roading and you scrape into brush or maybe even hit a rock in some of these center sections here, you might damage the plastic, but not the vehicle itself. And this will be way cheaper to replace. You won't have to repaint it, which could be very costly these days. And therefore you could argue is a nicer off-road feature to have. We do have those bigger premium wheels, four-wheel disc brakes all around with Mazda's dynamic stability control as well, and even the torque vectoring capabilities with the all-wheel drive. On this Turbo Premium Plus model, we do have the heated power mirrors that will fold in when the vehicle is locked, so kind of a nice quality of life feature there. You do, of course, get roof rails, which is a must-have if you're planning on doing any sort of adventurous outdoor stuff. You can put kayaks here or whatever you want, really, tents, etc. You do have that moonroof that's visible as well. We get privacy glass in the back, and of course, even Mazda's keyless entry system, which I personally prefer. I think it's one of the cleaner examples because there's no buttons on the exterior like some models have as well. If we take a look at the back here, we have these nice big bulgy fenders, which even the gas cap is actually molded to fit, which looks pretty good there. Then we do get a nice color-keyed sort of sport spoiler back here as well, which looks pretty good. More LED lighting, more vents, dual exhaust, and sort of silver to match the front of the car as well. But because this is the Premium Plus, we also get a power hatch. which is a pretty nice luxurious feature, not necessarily required, but a nice quality of life. And now you get access to all of your camera gear that you've just kind of stuffed into the back of your CX-50. But you also have these cool switches which actually allow you to just drop the seats at a moment's notice. And that's pretty convenient too, because now you can lay it back instead of having to walk around to the side of the vehicle and lower the seats that way. You also get the option of locking it or just lowering it depending on your use case. On top of that, if you want to carry more stuff than just in your CX-50, it does have a towing rating of up to 3,500 pounds, which is going to be available for here, the top-of-the-line turbo model. The other models will have lower ratings, but this more powerful engine also makes it one of the faster vehicles, but we'll talk more about that later. So moving on to the interior of the CX-50. We go ahead and open the door. We can see that the CX-50 actually has seating for 5 in total here. And you'll notice that we have this really cool terracotta theme, and it's even inspired by, of course, sort of off-roading, rugged nature of backpacks. So we have this sort of nylon stripe with this cool terracotta stitching down the middle that I think looks quite good. And you'll find that theme throughout the rest of the vehicle as well. And the fact that the stitching actually carries over here into the dash makes for a pretty good looking interior. I don't think anybody's ever said anything bad about any Mazda vehicle that's ever been produced from the interior perspective. Now let's go ahead and hop in and take a look at what's going on in here. Let's go ahead and start the vehicle up, and there are actually some changes for 2024 that we can find on the inside of the Mazda CX-50. So one of the things that Mazda's been known for is, of course, this sort of touchpad that's still in the car here, but now this larger 10.25-inch display is available in more trim models as of 2024, which is a great thing. Previously, this would have been more so limited to the turbo models like this one, which have a much heftier starting price of around $43,000 versus the CX-50 starting price of $30,000. Now, let's look at what all we have available here. While we're at the center display here for the middle, we can go ahead and talk about the fact that it also has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, which is run through a 12-speaker Bose sound system, which is also available on more trim models. Of course, that'll sort of come hand in hand with the larger display. So all of that is more available, which I think is all a very cool feature, is generally available. Now, this is still that sort of infamous Mazda system, which requires you to use these buttons in order to interact with it, which Mazda insists it is safer, and I do agree with them. The extent that the physical buttons are all distinctly different, so you know which exact button you're touching and messing with, including your volume controls, and a touchscreen can be more distracting because you're not sure exactly which button you're actually messing with or using in the vehicle. Now, looking at some of the other features here in the center of the driver display, it makes it look sort of analog, but it is a digital display. So all of these are sort of made up here with the exception of the sort of gauges here on the right for our fuel and, of course, our coolant temp gauges as well. And a lot of this can actually be adjusted to display different information, such as your mileage, direction, all of your driving assists, things of that nature as well, or just have it simply off if that's the way you want it. Now, as far as the other things that are available, we do get a heads-up display, which does have sign recognition, which is a fantastic feature to have, by the way. I really enjoy the way Mazda does their heads-up displays. It's super easy and convenient to use, and if you're in an area you're not familiar with, sometimes that sign recognition can go a long ways in terms of the overall usability and functionality of everything. In here on the steering wheel, you'll notice we also have our radar cruise control set buttons as well here on the right side, with a lot of our audio adjustments here, which are all really easy to use and distinct enough that you don't have to look at them to know which buttons you're messing with. So again, super helpful features in terms of the overall aesthetic and the nice feel of the Mazda steering wheel as well. In the center here, below that center display, we do have our dual zone climate control. So you'll note the two settings here for the driver and passenger. The seats themselves for the front are actually heated, ventilated, and powered for the front, which is very, very nice. And we even have a heated leather wrapped steering wheel. The seats themselves are actually leather trimmed as well. So some partial leather there, which is never a bad thing to have. And you can see even the door panels kind of match that theme that I pointed out earlier as well. As we move on, we do have some storage, some cup holders. We have our shifter for our 6-speed automatic transmission, which is an actual shifter, so that's a little bit easier to use than some of the more select shift models, in my opinion. You can flick it over into the manual mode, and now you can use the paddle shifters located on the back of the steering wheel to shift through the transmission if you have sporting intentions, which, speaking of sporting intentions, we have our Me drive mode. And what that does is it gives us access to our two different drive modes. Obviously, normal is exactly what it sounds like for everyday driving. Sport is actually going to kick up the responsiveness of the vehicle, make it more dynamic by adjusting sort of the engine revs, holding things out so the vehicle's a bit faster as well. And of course, the off-road mode, which, as I mentioned earlier, the CX-50 being the off-road themed version of the Mazda's SUV lineup, what this is going to do is it's going to help modulate the vehicle, the brakes, and even the all-wheel drive system to keep the vehicle more stable while off-road. So that's what you can expect with that. Of course, probably more responsiveness from the all-wheel drive system as well. As we take a look at the other things that we have here, these are just those controls I mentioned earlier. We do have some special optional controls, such as the hill launch assist and things like that, auto hold buttons. We do have our wireless charger, which is hidden back here. It is a Qi wireless charger, and of course some storage that actually opens up each side. So if your partner's, whoever's in your passenger seat here is using one armrest, you can of course open the other one and get access to the middle as well. So you could sort of argue that that's a pretty nice quality of life feature. And then kind of tucked in over here by your knee, you do have all of your various parking assists for your front and rear sensors, camera views. This does have that power hatch earlier, so you can actually pop that from here. And of course, memory settings, which of course apply exclusively to the driver's seat as well. So all that's very cool. Let's go ahead and shut off the vehicle and hop in the back real fast to take a look at what's going on back here. Then in the back here, we actually have some added luxuries that are optional for our higher Premium Plus, like the fact that we do have heated seats here in the back. You'll do notice there are vents for the rear passengers, so that's going to make it a bit more comfortable to be in the back, and some USB chargers as well. So overall, legroom and everything isn't that bad. I'm about 6 foot for reference, and with the seat set up for me, my knees aren't touching the back of the seat. So that to me means you have fairly good just overall settings. Even my head's not touching the roof, but if you wanted to open the space up, and you do in fact get the panoramic roof like this one has, you can open this up and it's going to sort of expand the space and make it feel just that much bigger. But that's a quick look at the interior of the CX-50. Under the hood, the CX-50 is available with a variety of powertrains. The base models are going to get a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, good for about 187 horsepower, but if you opt for the higher trim levels, you can get a turbocharged 2.5-liter 4-cylinder motor, good for about 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, which that base rating of the motor actually makes this one of the more powerful vehicles in the class. However, should you live in a state which can get 93 octane, the CX-50 will automatically retune itself to produce 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque, which by far makes this one of the most powerful vehicles in the class. And that's not just the case for the CX-50. Anything that comes in Mazda's lineup with this turbocharged engine can do that, which is pretty exciting. And if you're wondering if you do have 93 octane, you probably don't if you're on the West Coast. Here in Arizona, we tend to get our gas from California, therefore for the most part we only have 91 octane at the highest. Now this engine is paired with a 6-speed automatic transmission. That's the only one available regardless of what engine or trim level you go with, and that sends power to all 4 wheels courtesy of Mazda's iActive all-wheel drive system, which also features their torque vectoring system to sort of apply the brakes and such to help maneuver the car around for better stability. Now this vehicle weighs 3,864 pounds, and given that it's one of the more powerful vehicles, it has a fairly decent 0 to 60 time of just 6.4 seconds. It has a quarter-mile time of 14.9 seconds, and it has a top speed of 142 miles per hour per Mazda. So this thing will definitely get up and go when you need it to. Now, as far as how far can you drive it, what sort of fuel economy can you expect when you take this thing on off-road adventures? Well, the EPA rates it at 23 miles per gallon city, 29 miles per gallon highway, with a 25 miles per gallon combined. And given that it has a 15.9 gallon fuel tank, regardless of what trim you choose, Mazda says you can get a driving range of up to 477 miles, which is pretty far. Now, the turbocharged models, I would say a little bit less than that. Again, it depends on how you drive it, how heavy your foot is, but you can expect a decent amount of driving range for your off-road themed CX-50. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what it's like to drive the CX-50. Well, for 2024, they actually made some slightly different steering and driving adjustments, and I have to say the vehicle still feels really good in true Mazda fashion. They always put these great driving dynamics into all of their vehicles, regardless of really what it's for. Obviously, a lot of that stems from Mazda's sporting background, and the Miata is the best way to really experience everything Mazda has to offer in a sports car sense, but you still get a little taste of that in a lot of these vehicles. One of the things I really like that immediately stands out to me is just how stable this vehicle is. There's not a whole lot of body roll vehicle as you take it through turns like this. This is one of the more extreme instances, being on a back road, of driving the vehicle around with, let's say, sporting intent. But it does have that sporting drive mode, and I think it does feel a little bit at home in this vehicle because of those driving dynamics. On top of that, it's also an incredibly quiet vehicle. There's not a whole lot of wind noise. Even on the freeway, it's a very quiet vehicle. And so from that sense, it also feels fairly luxurious. Not to mention you have this very beautiful, in my opinion, interior that makes it more at home. With all the leather trimmings, including the steering wheel and the seats, it definitely feels fairly, let's say, more upscale than a lot of the competition. You certainly won't find that. Most of the competition will have plastic interiors and those sorts of things. Now, the biggest disadvantage, I would say, is how you might feel about these sort of control systems here, with Mazda's sort of approach to safety and having the physical controls. While some of the competition does have some easy-to-use touchscreens, you might have to argue if that's a deal breaker for you or not. I personally don't think it's that big of a deal. You get used to this control system in no time, and it just makes it very easy to use as far as a general driving standpoint. Everything's fairly comfortable as well. You could easily spend a lot of time in here, and you can even fit adults in the back for other road trips, which has a lot of great sporting intentions. The general visibility is pretty good. The A-pillars don't seem too obstructive. Of course, it is a little bit of a bigger vehicle, but I still have good visibility out of the very back window through the rear view mirror, which is also auto dimming. So in general, I would say it's a fairly easy to use experience. It's going to be comparable to a lot of the other competition vehicles, with the main difference being the sort of Mazda dynamic driving, with the power steering not being over boosted, and it is all-wheel drive. So if you were to stomp your foot, you might notice a little bit of understeer in some instances, but really for the most part, it's just going to make it so you have better traction most of the time. It's just a generally good looking vehicle, and I think you'll find it's one of the more enjoyable vehicles to drive on the road as well. In conclusion, the CX-50 is Mazda's more rugged off-road vehicle, which has a lot to argue with other competition. It's more off-road ready than, let's say, the RAV4 or some of the other compact SUVs in this space that are more suited to just general city driving, whereas this features a bit more ground clearance, has more powerful engine options, and regardless of which CX-50 you choose across the board, they all come with all-wheel drive and the off-road modes as well. So that makes this a really interesting value proposition while still being way cheaper than the significantly more expensive off-road SUVs that tend to start around $40,000. So it's a really interesting value segment there. Now, if you're not going to be taking the CX-50 off-road or don't really care about the adventure-ready aspect of it, there might be some other options that you might cross-shop with this that make a bit more sense for your lifestyle. But if you do like occasionally camping, hiking, etc., I think the CX-50 makes a great value proposition, especially because, in my opinion, Mazda makes some of the most exciting driving, regular, for lack of a better word, vehicles that you can buy new today. And so I think you just get a general, better, more interesting and unique experience by opting for the CX-50. So with that, that's going to be the end of the video. If you enjoyed it and could hit that like button for me, I'd really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.